The morning sun shimmered across the glass panels of Astrodynamics, one of the most prestigious aerospace corporations in the country. The headquarters stood tall, a modern marvel of steel and brilliance humming with the disciplined energy of people chasing ambition. Every day, suits and ties rushed through its marble-floored lobby, their polished shoes echoing confidence. And yet, amid the sea of sophistication, there was one man who never quite fit the picture: Ethan Reed. The janitor Ethan arrived every morning before dawn, quietly pushing his cleaning cart through the silent halls. His uniform was plain, his presence easily overlooked. While executives discussed million-dollar contracts and engineers debated over design blueprints, Ethan was there in the background, mopping floors, polishing windows, and emptying trash cans. To most, he was invisible, just another piece of the corporate machinery that nobody paid attention to. But there was something unusual about Ethan, something that only a few ever noticed. The way he looked at the company's aircraft models displayed in the lobby, the precision with which he arranged tools when passing by the engineering bay, and the quiet focus in his eyes when he paused near the hangar's glass windows to watch test flights. The employees gossiped about him often. "He's way too quiet," said one. "Probably just a failed mechanic," joked another. But the loudest of all critics was Isabella Hale, the CEO herself, a woman of impeccable class, brilliance, and pride. At 35, she had transformed Astrodynamics into one of the leading aviation firms in the world. She was a perfectionist known for her razor-sharp intellect, fierce leadership, and intolerance for mediocrity. Underneath her tailored blazer and decisive tone, Isabella carried the aura of a woman who always got what she wanted. That Friday morning, she had a meeting scheduled at the company's private airfield, a demonstration of their latest twin-engine helicopter prototype, the Astra Falcon X. Executives, engineers, and a few investors were invited to witness the flight demonstration. The helipad sparkled in the late morning light as the aircraft gleamed proudly, ready for its test. The crowd gathered, murmuring with excitement. Ethan, as always, was there too, assigned to clean up after the event. He stayed quietly in the background, broom in hand. As Isabella arrived in her black limousine, stepping out with the confidence of royalty, her heels clicked sharply against the concrete as she walked toward the helicopter. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said to her assistant, her voice carrying a mix of pride and arrogance. The engineers nodded in agreement, explaining the technical advancements, the new stabilizer systems, and the enhanced control algorithms. Isabella listened, smiling faintly, but her sharp eyes fell on Ethan, who stood a few meters away, his gaze fixed on the helicopter's rotor system. "Hey, you there," she called suddenly, making everyone turn. Ethan looked up, startled, realizing she was speaking to him. "Yes, ma'am," he said politely. Isabella tilted her head, studying him. "You seem quite interested in our machine. You think you could fly one of these?" she asked, her tone mocking. The crowd chuckled lightly, sensing her amusement. Ethan gave a small, humble smile. "No, ma'am. I'm just admiring the craftsmanship," he replied, his voice calm but respectful. Isabella smirked, crossing her arms. "Craftsmanship? Do you even know what that word means in aviation?" she teased. The laughter around her grew louder. But Ethan didn't flinch. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. It's the combination of precision, balance, and intuition. Something that goes beyond numbers. It's what keeps a bird in the sky." The laughter faded. Isabella blinked, momentarily caught off guard by his eloquence. She quickly regained her composure. "Well then, Mr. Philosopher Janitor," she said sarcastically, "if you think you understand it so well, why don't you fly this helicopter? Fly it, and I'll marry you." The words drew gasps and laughter from the crowd. Even her assistant whispered, "Ma'am," as if to caution her. But Isabella waved her hand dismissively, enjoying her own arrogance. Ethan's expression didn't change. He looked at the helicopter for a moment, then at her, his calm eyes steady. "Be careful with your promises, ma'am," he said softly. The tone of his voice, so confident and measured, sent an unexpected chill down Isabella's spine. But she shrugged it off, smirking. "Don't worry, Janitor. You'll never have to hold me to it." The event continued. The chief test pilot, Marcus, took over and began his pre-flight checks. Engines roared to life, blades slicing the air with powerful rhythm. The Falcon X lifted gracefully, performing a series of maneuvers that showcased its agility. The audience clapped and Isabella smiled proudly, her taunt toward Ethan already forgotten. But Ethan remained standing there, his eyes following every detail of the flight with unnerving precision. He noticed the subtle tilt in the rotor alignment, the faint tremor in the stabilizer, and the lag in response during turns, details no one else caught. When Marcus landed, the crowd applauded, but Ethan frowned slightly, muttering under his breath. That shouldn't have happened. As people dispersed for lunch, Ethan walked toward the helicopter, drawn by instinct. He gently placed his hand on the fuselage, feeling the faint vibration of the machine as it cooled down. "You feel it, don't you?" he whispered to the aircraft as if speaking to an old friend. "Hey," shouted one of the mechanics. "You're not allowed to touch that." Ethan quickly stepped back, apologizing. But before the mechanic could scold him further, the chief engineer approached. "Wait," he said. "What did you just say?" Ethan hesitated, unsure if he should speak. But he finally replied, "The left stabilizer's slightly off balance. It might cause drift under crosswind." "It's minor but risky." The engineer's expression changed. "How do you know that?" Ethan didn't answer, only gave a small shrug. The engineer checked the diagnostic panel and froze. The reading showed exactly what Ethan had described. "That's impossible," he murmured. When Isabella returned from her phone call, she saw the commotion. "What's going on?" she demanded. The engineer looked at her, then at Ethan. "This janitor just caught a mechanical imbalance that none of us noticed," he said, astonished. The laughter from earlier evaporated. Isabella stared at Ethan, her expression unreadable. "Lucky guess," she said, though her tone was weaker now. Ethan smiled faintly. "Luck's just what people call it when they don't understand skill," he replied. The quiet confidence in his words unsettled her again. "Who are you, really?" she asked, crossing her arms. Ethan looked at her, then said softly, "Just someone who used to love flying." As the crowd around them watched in silence, Isabella felt something she hadn't felt in years: curiosity. There was something about Ethan that didn't fit the picture of a janitor. His posture, his composure, even the way he observed everything around him, it all hinted at something deeper. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the hangar lights flickered on, Isabella found herself replaying his words in her mind. "Be careful with your promises, ma'am." It was strange how that one sentence, so calmly spoken, lingered like a melody she couldn't forget. The next day, she made a decision. She wanted to know who Ethan Reed really was, and what she would uncover would shake her entire world. The following Monday morning, the atmosphere inside Astrodynamics was different. Whispers filled the air, echoing down the marble halls. The story of the janitor who corrected the engineers had spread like wildfire across the company. Some laughed it off as a fluke, others were intrigued, but one person couldn't stop thinking about it. Isabella Hale, the CEO herself. She had built her empire on precision and control, yet something about that quiet man unsettled her. Every instinct told her there was more to him than met the eye. She sat in her glass-walled office overlooking the city, her fingers tapping lightly against her tablet as she scrolled through employee records. The hum of helicopters outside her window was constant, but her mind wasn't on the business meetings or investor reports. Instead, it was fixed on one name: Ethan Reed. She typed it into the internal database, expecting to find a standard background check, maybe a basic employment history or a reference from a janitorial agency. But to her surprise, his profile was minimal. Too minimal. Ethan Reed, janitorial staff. Hired 8 months ago. Excellent conduct. No disciplinary actions. Prior experience. Classified? She frowned. Classified? Astrodynamics didn't usually hire anyone with sealed work records unless they were from the defense sector. She leaned back in her chair, puzzled. A janitor with classified history? That didn't make sense. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. It was her assistant, Lila, carrying a fresh cup of coffee. "You've been in here since 7, ma'am," she said gently. "You should take a break." Isabella didn't look up. "Lila, find out everything you can about Ethan Reed," discreetly. Lila hesitated. "The janitor?" "Yes, and don't tell anyone I asked." That afternoon, while meetings and presentations carried on, Lila got to work. She checked internal files, HR systems, even public records, but the more she searched, the stranger it became. There was almost nothing on Ethan. No social media, no previous addresses, no digital footprint. It was as if he'd appeared out of thin air. She finally managed to find a small note in an archived document. Former technical consultant, United States Air Force, clearance level Omega. Resigned, confidential circumstances. Her eyes widened. Technical consultant? Air Force? She rushed to Isabella's office, closing the door behind her. Ma'am, I found something. She handed over the file. Isabella scanned the document, her sharp eyes narrowing with each line. He worked for the military? She murmured. Why would a man like that be cleaning floors? That evening, curiosity became obsession. Isabella drove down to the hangar where Ethan usually worked night shifts. The massive steel doors groaned as they opened, revealing the dimly lit floor, the scent of oil and jet fuel thick in the air. And there he was, Ethan, standing beside one of the smaller choppers, cleaning its windshield with meticulous care, his movements precise, almost reverent. Mr. Reed, Isabella's voice echoed through the hangar. He turned, startled, then quickly composed himself. Good evening, ma'am, he said. Working late? I could ask you the same, she replied, walking closer. You like being around these machines, don't you? Ethan smiled faintly. They're quieter company than most people, she smirked. I did some digging, she said. His hands paused mid-wipe. And? He asked calmly. And I found out you're not exactly who you pretend to be, she said, studying his face for a reaction. You worked with the U.S. Air Force, clearance level Omega. That's not a janitor's resume. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the hum of a generator somewhere in the background. Ethan placed the cleaning cloth on the tool tray and turned to face her fully. You did your homework, he said softly. Why are you here? She asked, crossing her arms. If you have that kind of background, why waste your time sweeping hangars? What are you hiding? Ethan looked down, his expression unreadable. Maybe I'm just tired of flying, he said. Tired of flying? She repeated skeptically. Or tired of something else? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the open door of the helicopter, resting his hand on the control panel. You know what happens when you fly long enough? He said quietly. You stop being afraid of the sky, but you start being afraid of what you might lose up there. Isabella frowned, unsure what he meant. That sounds poetic, but it doesn't answer my question. Ethan sighed, his eyes distant. I used to test advanced prototypes for the military, he said finally. Helicopters, drones, even experimental fighters. But one mission went wrong. A system failure or sabotage, depending on who you ask. I was blamed. Lost everything overnight. I walked away from aviation and promised myself I'd never touch a cockpit again. The confession hung in the air like a ghost. Isabella stared at him, speechless. So you decided to become a janitor? She asked softly. Ethan gave a small shrug. It's honest work. Keeps me close to what I love without the noise of politics. For a moment, Isabella didn't know what to say. She had spent her entire career fighting for respect in a male-dominated industry, constantly proving her worth. Yet here was a man who had willingly stepped away from everything. Pride, power, recognition, and seemed completely at peace with it. You could have had everything, she said finally. I did, he replied, his voice low, and I lost it all because I trusted the wrong people. Sometimes peace is worth more than a paycheck. There was something in his tone, a quiet strength, a humility she rarely encountered. For the first time in years, Isabella felt her own arrogance reflected back at her, and it stung. Then why did you correct my engineer last week? She asked, trying to regain her composure. Because someone could have been hurt, he said simply. Machines don't care about pride. They just do what they're told. If you don't listen, they remind you the hard way. Her lips parted slightly. There was no defiance in his words, only truth. She felt an unfamiliar warmth of respect rising inside her. After a long pause, she said, Ethan, tomorrow I have a demonstration flight for potential investors. Our chief pilot's out sick. I was going to cancel, but... She hesitated. Would you fly it? His eyes widened. You want me to fly your prototype? You said you're done flying, she said, tilting her head. But maybe it's time to prove that promise wrong. He laughed softly. You remember what you said the first time we met? That if I flew the helicopter, you'd marry me. Her face flushed slightly. I was joking. I know, he said. But I don't fly for games, Miss Hale. Then fly for redemption, she replied. Ethan looked at her for a long time as if weighing every possible consequence. Finally, he nodded. Tomorrow morning, he said. That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the strange twist of fate, how a janitor had shaken her confidence more than any competitor or investor ever had. His calm voice, his steady eyes, his quiet wisdom, they lingered in her thoughts. Meanwhile, in a small apartment across town, Ethan sat alone by his window, staring at the moonlit skyline. On his desk lay a worn photograph, a younger version of himself in a flight suit, standing beside another pilot and a helicopter marked with military insignia. He touched the edge of the picture gently. "Tomorrow," he whispered. One last time. At dawn, the Astrodynamics airfield buzzed with activity. Investors arrived, cameras flashed, and employees gathered. The Falcon X prototype gleamed under the golden morning light. Isabella stood near the helipad, dressed sharply, her heart pounding in her chest. Then she saw him, Ethan, walking calmly toward the helicopter, wearing a flight suit borrowed from the engineering bay. The same man who had been mopping floors a week ago now moved with the quiet authority of someone who belonged among the clouds. The crowd murmured in confusion. "Is that the janitor?" someone whispered. Isabella silenced them with a glance. Her eyes stayed locked on Ethan as he inspected the aircraft, his movements confident, deliberate, professional. He checked the stabilizers, the instruments, the fuel gauges, every detail handled with the precision of a man who had done this thousands of times before. When he finally climbed into the cockpit, Isabella felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. "He's really going to do it," she whispered to herself. The engines roared to life. The blades began to spin, slicing the air with increasing speed until the sound grew into a thunderous rhythm. Dust swirled around the helipad as the Falcon X lifted gracefully off the ground. Gasps filled the air as Ethan guided it upward, steady and smooth, performing a takeoff that was textbook perfect. For the next 10 minutes, he executed maneuvers no one had seen before. Precise turns, controlled dives, flawless rotations. It was artistry in motion. The investors stared in awe, and Isabella felt something stir inside her, pride, admiration, and disbelief all at once. When the helicopter finally touched down, the entire crowd erupted in applause. Isabella could hardly move. She walked toward the cockpit slowly as Ethan stepped out, helmet in hand, sweat glistening on his forehead but a calm smile on his lips. "Still think I'm just a janitor?" he asked softly. She shook her head, speechless. "Who are you, really?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Someone who once lost everything to pride, and learned what it cost to underestimate someone." Her eyes softened, her voice barely a whisper. "You've just taught me that lesson too." But deep down, Isabella knew this was only the beginning. The applause echoed long after the Falcon X had landed, and though the sound faded into the vastness of the airfield, the weight of what had just happened hung thick in the air. Isabella Hale, the powerful CEO who thought she had seen everything, stood frozen as the man she once mocked, her company's janitor, walked past her with the calm authority of a veteran pilot. The crowd's murmurs swelled around her, investors whispering in disbelief, engineers staring as if witnessing a ghost. The janitor had done the impossible. He had not only flown the company's prototype flawlessly, but had performed maneuvers that even their top pilots had struggled to master. And he had done it with effortless grace. As Ethan stepped onto the tarmac, still wearing the borrowed flight suit, his expression was composed but distant. Isabella approached him, her heart pounding with a mixture of confusion, admiration, and a strange guilt she couldn't quite name. "You were extraordinary," she said softly, almost against her will. "How did you—" Ethan smiled faintly, interrupting her. "Flying isn't just about skill," he said. "It's about trust. The machine listens when the pilot respects it. Most people forget that." Before Isabella could respond, the investors swarmed in, shaking his hand, asking questions, praising his precision. Even the chief engineer, a man who had once scoffed at Ethan, looked humbled. "That flight was flawless," he admitted. "Your control inputs, your adjustments, it was like you were part of the aircraft." Ethan nodded politely but didn't seem eager to bask in the attention. He kept his gaze steady, almost detached, as though he'd flown not to prove anything but to fulfill a promise to himself. Isabella watched him closely, sensing that beneath that calm demeanor there was a storm of memories. When the crowd finally dispersed, she gestured for him to follow her into her office near the hangar. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. The glass walls framed the runway outside, where the Falcon X now stood silently, reflecting the bright morning light. "I don't understand," Isabella said, turning to face him. "You said you were done flying, that you walked away from it. So why did you do it today?" Ethan took a slow breath, his eyes tracing the skyline beyond the window. "Because you reminded me of someone," he said quietly. "Who?" she asked. He turned to her, and in that moment something flickered behind his eyes. Grief, perhaps, or nostalgia. "Your father." Isabella's breath caught. "My father?" Ethan nodded. "I knew him. Years ago. He wasn't just the founder of Astrodynamics to me, he was my mentor. The man who taught me everything I know about flight, about engineering, about what it means to trust the sky." Isabella felt the world tilt slightly beneath her feet. Her father, Richard Hale, had passed away a decade ago in a plane crash that had left her scarred and driven to carry on his legacy. He had been a visionary, the kind of man who inspired loyalty and respect from everyone around him. But in all the years since his death, she had never once heard the name Ethan Reed. "You knew him?" she repeated, her voice softer now. Ethan nodded. "I worked with him in the early stages of the Falcon project, before Astrodynamics became what it is now. Back then it was just an idea, a dream of building aircraft that were smarter, safer, and more intuitive than anything the world had seen." Isabella blinked in disbelief. "That was over 15 years ago. You'd have to have been 25, he said with a small smile. "Fresh out of the Air Force. Your father took a chance on me when no one else would." Her throat tightened. "He never mentioned you." "I know," Ethan replied, his tone heavy with something unspoken. "He couldn't. The project was classified. We worked under the radar for years, building prototypes that even the government didn't know about. I was his chief test pilot." She stared at him, trying to reconcile the image of the humble janitor she'd dismissed with the man now standing before her. A man who had shared her father's dream, his vision. "If that's true," she said slowly, "then why disappear? Why end up here, cleaning floors in the very company you helped build?" Ethan looked away, his jaw tightening. "Because of what happened the day your father died." The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella's pulse quickened. "You were there?" she whispered. He nodded, his voice low. "We were testing the first Falcon prototype. It was supposed to be a routine flight, a demonstration of the new AI-assisted control system your father designed. But something went wrong. The system malfunctioned mid-flight. I tried to stabilize it, but the override wouldn't engage. Your father was in the co-pilot seat." He paused, his voice catching slightly. "When the engine started to fail, he made me eject. He stayed behind, trying to regain control. He saved my life." Isabella felt tears prick at her eyes. The official report had said mechanical failure. She had spent years blaming the engineers, the regulators, even herself. But she had never known the full story. "He stayed behind to save you," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "He was the bravest man I ever knew. After the crash, the company covered up the details. They needed someone to blame for the failure, and I was the easiest target." She felt a lump rise in her throat. "They blamed you?" He nodded. "Said I ignored flight protocols, that I panicked under pressure. They revoked my license, destroyed my record. I tried to fight it, but the truth was buried under layers of corporate politics. Your father's death became my burden to carry." For a long moment, Isabella couldn't speak. The world she had believed in, the empire her father built, suddenly seemed fragile, filled with hidden shadows. "And all this time," she whispered, "you've been here in his company working as a janitor." "I didn't come here for revenge," Ethan said quietly. "I came here because it's the last place he was alive. I wanted to be close to what he built, even if I could never fly again." Tears stung her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" He smiled faintly. "Would you have listened?" The great Isabella Hale, CEO of Astrodynamics, taking advice from a janitor. She looked down, ashamed. "You're right," she admitted. "I wouldn't have. I thought I knew everything. I thought strength meant never being wrong." Ethan stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. "Your father never saw strength that way. He used to say the sky humbles everyone eventually. No one's too high to fall." The words hit her like a memory. "He used to say that to me," she whispered. "When I was a child, he'd take me up in his old Cessna. He'd look at the clouds and say, 'Remember, Izzy, the sky doesn't care who you are. It only rewards those who respect it.'" Ethan's eyes softened. He said that to everyone he cared about. For the first time, Isabella smiled through her tears. You really knew him, he nodded. Better than most. There was a pause, a quiet understanding settling between them. Isabella walked to her desk, her mind racing. Ethan, I want to make this right, she said firmly. Your record, your reputation, everything. You don't belong as a janitor. You belong here as a pilot, as part of the Falcon project. Ethan shook his head gently. I didn't fly today for a job, Isabella. I flew because your father believed in second chances. And maybe it's time you did too. She frowned slightly. What do you mean? He looked at her, his gaze steady. You've built an empire, yes. But somewhere along the way, you started measuring people by their titles, not their worth. That's what your father tried to change in this industry. His words stung, but they were true. Isabella had spent years demanding perfection, dismissing anyone who didn't fit her standards. She had forgotten the human side of leadership, the side her father embodied. You sound just like him, she said quietly. Maybe that's why I stayed, Ethan replied. Because someone needed to remind you of who you really are. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, it was reflective. The afternoon light streamed through the glass, bathing them both in gold. Outside, the Falcon X stood still, a symbol of the past and future merging together. Finally, Isabella spoke. If my father were here, she said softly, he'd probably tell me to thank you. Ethan smiled. Then do what he would have done. Take care of the people who believe in your vision. She nodded slowly. I will. But I also want to make things right for you, Ethan. You deserve that much. He turned toward the window, his voice barely above a whisper. The only thing I've ever wanted, he said, is for his dream to live on. And maybe now it finally can. As he started to leave, Isabella called after him. Ethan? He turned. About what I said the other day. She began, a small smile playing at her lips. You know, about flying the helicopter and marrying me. He chuckled softly. Don't worry, Miss Hale, I don't plan on holding you to that. Good, she said, her tone teasing. Because I don't date employees. He raised an eyebrow. Then it's a good thing I'm just the janitor, right? Their laughter broke the tension that had been building between them, a sound so genuine it startled even her. For the first time in years, Isabella felt light, free from the weight of ego and expectation. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and the airfield grew quiet, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Ethan Reed was no ordinary man, and fate clearly wasn't done with either of them. Because somewhere deep in the shadows of astrodynamics, a secret was still waiting, one that would test everything they thought they knew about loyalty, redemption, and love. The next morning at Astrodynamics began like any other, at least on the surface. The hangars buzzed with activity. Mechanics worked on engines. Engineers debated flight dynamics, and the hum of ambition filled the air. But beneath that routine, something had shifted. Everyone had seen what happened yesterday. The janitor who had flown the Falcon X better than any trained pilot was now the center of whispered conversations. The story spread like wildfire through the company halls, part awe, part disbelief, part gossip. But for Isabella Hale, the shock had transformed into purpose. She was determined to uncover everything, the truth about her father's death, the injustice Ethan had suffered, and the secrets Astrodynamics had buried for over a decade. She sat in her office, staring at the digital archive projected across her desk. Rows of encrypted files shimmered in blue light, each labeled with old project codes she hadn't seen in years. Project Skyward, Prototype Falcon Alpha, Incident Report 17A. The deeper she dug, the more restricted files she found. Most were marked classified, accessible only by her late father, or by someone with his old credentials. She sighed, rubbing her temples. The company's current data security was airtight, and bypassing those encryption walls would trigger every alert in the system. Just then, a soft knock echoed. Ethan stepped inside, dressed in his old work uniform, though the insignia on his sleeve looked different now. The janitor's badge had been replaced by a simple tag reading Test Consultant. Isabella had ordered it herself that morning. I figured it's about time people called you what you are, she said when he noticed it. Ethan smiled faintly but didn't comment. You wanted to see me? Yes, she said, gesturing to the holographic screen. You mentioned the crash report from years ago, how you were blamed. I want to clear your name, but I can't do that without the official flight data. The files are sealed behind my father's old security keys. Ethan's expression darkened. That's not surprising. Your father used encryption protocols even the Pentagon couldn't crack. But I might know someone who can help. Who? An old colleague, Ethan said. Back in the day, we called him Cypher. Real name's Dr. Marcus Levin. He was our systems engineer on Project Skyward. After the crash, he disappeared. Refused to testify, went off-grid. If anyone still has the old access codes, it's him. Isabella nodded. Then we find him. Ethan hesitated. He's not the type who wants to be found, Isabella. He's paranoid for good reason. After your father's death, he told me someone inside Astra was selling proprietary flight tech to foreign contractors, before the government even had clearance. He thought the crash wasn't an accident. She felt a chill creep down her spine. You think someone sabotaged the prototype? I think someone wanted your father gone, Ethan replied grimly. The weight of those words hung heavy between them. Isabella's mind raced. If what he said was true, then everything she knew about her father's death was a lie. She clenched her fists. Then we're not stopping until we know who. That evening, as the rest of the facility went dark, Ethan and Isabella slipped into the restricted archives located beneath the main hangar. The corridors were lined with glass panels, each scanning their biometrics at every turn. Ethan's calm composure guided her through. It was clear he'd walked these halls long before she became CEO. When they reached the vault, Isabella's hand trembled slightly as she pressed it against the final scanner. The door opened with a low hiss. Inside, rows of old hardware filled the room. Servers, flight recorders, and dusty terminals from the early days of Astra Dynamics. Ethan walked straight to a specific cabinet marked Falcon Alpha, Crash Data 2009. He pulled out a small black box the size of a paperback book. This is it, he said quietly. The flight data recorder from the crash. I tried to access it years ago, but it was locked with your father's key signature. Isabella gently took the box. Then we find Marcus Levin and make him unlock it. But as they turned to leave, a red light began flashing overhead. A mechanical voice spoke from the ceiling. Unauthorized archive access detected. Security breach logged. Damn it, Ethan muttered. We tripped a silent alarm. They sprinted out of the vault, moving through the maintenance corridors. Isabella's heart raced. Can't you override it? Not anymore, he said. These systems have been upgraded since I left. They reached the side exit, but before they could open the door, 2 corporate security guards appeared, blocking their way. Ms. Hale, one of them said sharply. You're not authorized to access that sector without clearance from the board. What's going on? Isabella squared her shoulders, slipping back into her CEO demeanor. This is an internal audit, she said coldly. You just compromised it by interrupting. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. No one wanted to challenge the CEO directly. Understood, ma'am, one finally said. We'll report this as a system test. Do that, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. They turned away, but as she and Ethan stepped into the night air, he shook his head. You handled that well. Years of practice, she said dryly. But next time, maybe give me a heads up before tripping a company alarm. He smirked. You were the one holding the flight recorder. Despite the tension, they both laughed. The sound was brief but real. Then Isabella's expression hardened again. Where do we find Marcus? Ethan's answer came without hesitation. He lives off the grid, somewhere in Nevada. Old airfield, abandoned hangars. If he's still alive, that's where he'll be. 2 days later, they were standing in the middle of the Mojave Desert. The sun beat down mercilessly as their jeep rolled across cracked dirt toward a cluster of rusted hangars. The place looked deserted, except for the faint hum of solar panels and the occasional glint of satellite dishes. This is it, Ethan said. Isabella scanned the area warily. It looks like no one's lived here in years. Trust me, Ethan said. Marcus is watching us already. As if on cue, a metallic voice echoed from hidden speakers. You've got 5 seconds to tell me who you are before I turn this jeep into scrap metal. Ethan raised his hands. Marcus, it's me. Ethan Reed, you remember the idiot who wouldn't quit? There was a long silence. Then the hangar door groaned open. A man stepped out, older now, his beard streaked with gray, eyes sharp despite years of isolation. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. The ghost of Falcon Alpha himself. Ethan smiled faintly. Good to see you too, Cypher. Marcus's gaze flicked to Isabella. And you brought company. This is Isabella Hale, Ethan said. Richard's daughter. Marcus's expression softened instantly. "You've got his eyes," he said quietly. "He was a good man." "Then help us honor him," Isabella said, holding out the black box. "We need the truth." Marcus studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Come inside." Inside the hangar, old computers hummed beside piles of dismantled drones and circuit boards. Marcus placed the recorder on a table, connecting it to a tangle of cables. "Your father encrypted this with a quantum algorithm before that tech even hit the mainstream," he said, fingers flying over the keys. "It'll take me a bit to break through." As the decryption process began, the sound of data streaming filled the room. Then slowly, lines of code unraveled into video telemetry, voice recordings, and sensor readings from the crash. Isabella leaned forward, her heart pounding as the final sequence played. Her father's voice filled the speakers. "Ethan, we're losing stabilization. Manual override isn't responding." Ethan's younger voice followed. "Copy that." Attempting to reroute power to auxiliary systems. Then another voice, one that didn't belong, cold, mechanical, unfamiliar. "Override command denied. Authorization required. Level black clearance." Marcus froze. "Level black? That's not a system error. That's an external command." "What does that mean?" Isabella asked. "It means someone remotely hijacked the prototype mid-flight," Marcus said grimly. This wasn't a malfunction. It was sabotage. The room fell silent. Ethan's jaw tightened. Who had level black clearance back then? Marcus looked at Isabella, his expression dark. "Only 3 people, your father, me, and his business partner, Leonard Crane." Isabella's blood ran cold. Leonard Crane was her current CFO, the man who had guided her after her father's death, the man she trusted with everything. "That's impossible," she whispered. Ethan's voice was sharp. "No, it's not. He gained control after the crash, didn't he?" Marcus nodded. "He used your father's death to seize the patents and restructure Astra into what it is now. He's been selling modified versions of your father's designs to private defense contractors for years." The reality hit Isabella like a storm. Her father's legacy, her company's foundation, it had all been built on a lie. "He murdered my father," she said softly, fury trembling in her voice. Marcus turned the monitor toward her. "And now that you've opened the old files, he'll know you're on to him." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "We need to get this data to someone trustworthy. If Crane finds out we have proof, he'll bury it, and us with it." But even as he spoke, the sound of distant engines roared outside the hangar. Marcus's security cameras flickered, showing black SUVs speeding across the desert. "Too late," Marcus said. "He already knows." Ethan grabbed Isabella's arm. "We have to move, now." They sprinted toward the back exit as the first SUV screeched to a stop outside. Armed men poured out, dressed in black tactical gear, faces hidden behind helmets. Bullets tore through the hangar walls, sparks flying. Marcus shoved a flash drive into Ethan's hand. "This has everything, the data, the voice logs, the proof. Get it out of here." "What about you?" Ethan shouted. Marcus shook his head. "I'll hold them off, go." Isabella hesitated, but Ethan pulled her toward the jeep. They raced away just as the hangar exploded behind them, flames lighting up the desert sky. The shockwave rattled the ground, and Isabella clutched the dashboard, tears streaming down her face. "Marcus, he didn't have to." Ethan's voice was grim. He knew what was at stake. And now it's up to us. As the desert stretched endlessly before them, the horizon glowed with the dying embers of the explosion. In her hand, Isabella clutched the flash drive, the key to her father's murder and the truth that could destroy Astra Dynamics. Ethan glanced at her, his expression resolute. "We just declared war on Leonard Crane," he said quietly. She nodded, her eyes filled with fire. "Then we finish it." The desert night stretched endlessly as Ethan Reed gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, while Isabella Hale clutched the flash drive that contained her father's final proof. Behind them, the glow of the destroyed hangar still flickered faintly against the horizon, a reminder of the peril they had just escaped. The engines of the jeep roared against the vast silence, yet their minds were sharper than ever. They knew that the next move would determine not just the fate of Astra Dynamics, but the legacy of her father and the life of a man who had once been dismissed as a mere janitor. "We need a secure location," Ethan said, glancing at Isabella as they weaved through the rough desert roads. "Crane won't stop until he gets that drive. He has resources, connections, and men willing to kill for him." Isabella nodded, gripping the dashboard tightly. I know a place. My family's old private airfield in Montana. It's isolated, heavily secured, and off the radar. No one will find us there for a while. Hours later, they landed at the small airfield under the cloak of darkness. The runways were empty, the hangars silent. Here, surrounded by familiar echoes of her father's influence, Isabella felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. She turned to Ethan. We've got the proof we've survived an ambush, and now we confront him. Ethan's jaw tightened. Crane is dangerous, but so are we now. Together we have the skill, the knowledge, and the element of surprise. Inside a reinforced hangar, they began preparing. The Falcon X prototype, already humming quietly, was fueled and ready. Ethan ran diagnostics with the precision of a man who had never truly left the sky. Every lever, every dial, every rotor adjustment was double-checked. Isabella, meanwhile, examined the flash drive's data on a secure laptop. She read through the encrypted files showing contracts, communications, and flight data. Leonard Crane had not only orchestrated her father's death, but he had profited from selling the Falcon prototypes illegally to private contractors around the globe. This is bigger than we thought, Isabella said, her voice sharp with a mix of anger and determination. We can bring him down legally, but he's too cunning. If we go public too early, he'll cover his tracks and disappear. We need a plan that ensures he can't escape justice. Ethan nodded. We lure him in, make him think he's untouchable. Then we expose everything, live, undeniable, and in his face. The plan took the entire night to finalize. Using Isabella's influence, they fabricated a high-profile investor event, a simulated inspection of a new prototype Falcon helicopter that was, in reality, a trap. Crane would come, thinking he could manipulate or sabotage the event. But in truth, Isabella and Ethan had prepared a team of loyal engineers, private security, and strategically placed cameras to capture every move. Dawn broke, painting the sky in gold and crimson. Crane arrived, dressed in his signature tailored suit, exuding arrogance. He walked confidently toward the hangar, unaware that the very man he had once tried to destroy was waiting inside, calm and prepared. You shouldn't have come, Crane, Ethan said, stepping into the open doorway with Isabella by his side. The flash drive was prominently displayed in her hand. Crane's smirk faltered slightly. Ethan Reed, I thought you were gone, out of the picture. And you, Isabella, child of my dear late partner. I should have known you'd try something desperate. Desperate, yes, Isabella thought, but more than desperate, determined. You underestimated us, she said firmly, and that's why you're going down today. With a subtle nod from Ethan, engineers remotely activated the Falcon X's onboard cameras and sensors, streaming everything directly to secure servers and live feeds ready to transmit to authorities worldwide. Crane's men reached for weapons, but before they could react, private security surrounded them, cutting off any escape routes. You've built an empire on lies and betrayal, Isabella said, her voice echoing through the hangar. You orchestrated my father's death, sabotaged Ethan's career, and profited from stolen technology. Today the world will know the truth. Crane's face twisted with rage. You think you can destroy me? I built this empire. You have nothing. No proof anyone will believe. Ethan stepped forward, calm and precise. Oh, we have everything, he said, holding up the flash drive. Emails, contracts, video recordings, flight data from Falcon Alpha, the proof of your betrayal. Every illegal deal you've made, every life you've endangered, it's all here. At that moment, Isabella triggered the live feed. Screens around the hangar flickered to life, broadcasting Crane's crimes to law enforcement agencies, investors, and media outlets. His empire of deceit crumbled in real time. Crane's confident smirk dissolved into panic as he realized there was no escape. You'll never get away with this, he shouted, but his voice was drowned by the chaos unfolding around him. The authorities moved in, taking him and his key operatives into custody. Crane's reign of terror had ended. Isabella exhaled deeply, a mix of relief and triumph washing over her. It's over, she said quietly, turning to Ethan. Thanks to you. Ethan shook his head. We didn't do this for thanks. We did it because it was right. Your father would have wanted the truth to come out. She smiled faintly, realizing the man beside her, the one she had once dismissed, was more than a hero. He was her partner in justice, a guardian of her father's legacy, and a reminder that strength is not measured by title, wealth, or position, but by courage, integrity, and skill. The Falcon X stood quietly in the hangar, its rotors gleaming in the morning sun. For a moment, Ethan and Isabella just looked at it, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The sky remembered, and justice had finally flown. Ethan finally broke the silence. "So, about that little bet you made," Isabella raised an eyebrow. "The one about marrying you if you flew the helicopter?" He smiled faintly. "I think we might need a new wager. Something more." "Grounded," she laughed, a sound of relief and warmth. "Agreed." In the end, justice had been served, secrets unveiled, and a humble janitor had shown the world that true greatness often comes disguised as ordinary. And as the sky above Astrodynamics glowed golden with the sunrise, it seemed to whisper a promise. Those who respect it will always rise.